word city occurs 1,250 times. The virgin birth twice. I'd believe it if it were mentioned once, man. It's important doctrine. City is mentioned 1,250 times. 142 cities in the Bible. Some mention once, some mention hundreds of times. I started doing case studies on biblical cities. Sodom and Gomorrah. 51 texts. 31:4 in the Old, 17 in the New. I started coming back telling my Trinity faculty, you know, thank you for teaching me to read Hebrew and Greek, but here's what I'm finding. The word here, or Urim, 1,090 times in the Old Testament. I started doing case studies. Then in church history, I started studying the history of urban churches from the 1st century on. And the crisis. Finally, I put it all in the book. It's mostly in the footnotes in that book, but it's in the endnotes. It's the theology is big. It really, the thesis is there. It's my search for a theology. I wrote other things before, the Urban Christian, right, where I fell in love with Chicago. That was the other value. I said, I don't love Chicago. It's dirty, ugly, noisy, and corrupt. All our mayors named daily. We pray for our daily bread. we all know how to follow Jesus politically, man. He rode a donkey, not an elephant. And we never doubted. You got it? We never doubted the resurrection. Every 4 years, whole cemeteries rise and vote. Vote early and vote often. I miss Chicago politics. I decided I got to study the city. You know, 5,200 miles of streets in the city limits of Chicago, 77 neighborhoods. I'm going to go to the Catholic parishes. I'm going to study, and I fell into this, and it turned out to be genius. I said, if you learn a language, you learn the regular verbs first. Then you learn the irregular verbs, right? The regular verb of Chicago is the Catholic Church. Protestants are the irregular verbs. We fill in spots. 440 parishes, the largest Catholic church, larger even than New York because it's one archdiocese. I said, I'm going to go visit every Catholic church in 77 neighborhoods. I walk in there and say, you may be too busy, but I need to know. First of all, I want to thank you for being here. Secondly, why did your people not run away? Well, we have a parish. Don't you know? We have a theology of place. I said, no, evangelicals don't know that. We have theology for programs, persons, but we're basically Gnostic. We have disconnected. Communities for us are like styrofoam cups. They're just utilitarian. We throw them away if they're not convenient. We'd rather move out there, build in neutral space, so-called. We've abandoned communities in the name of the one who became flesh and dwelt among us. So for me, it was a recovery of the doctrine of theology of place. Going all the way back to Ebenezer Stone's Bethel, House of God, wherever you're. And so it was a theology of revolution for me, but it was stimulated by this question: why are all these evangelicals fleeing? I mean, my wife and I said, look, if God's agenda is to empty the city, I'm out of here. No sociology book is going to keep me here. But if there is a theology as big as Chicago, and then I said, I can't let a city drain me. It's got to minister to me. Man, Chicago became my lab. It was so exciting. I packed up my kids and I visited neighborhood after neighborhood. I went to fires and rallies. You know, it's free. It's free.
Free entertainment?
Unbelievable. My kids. And you know what I found? If you take your little kids to riots and fires, you'll be perfectly safe. You know why? Because they'll know you're not a cop or an undercover detective. Why else would a white honky be there? But you're there with your kids. They know you didn't come to cause trouble. They surround you. I learned what every missionary had learned overseas. when you move into a neighborhood, take your the children become the early adopters, and they break down the community. They break down the walls. And my kids became my guardians. And 36 years in the public schools there. There were 63 nations in my kids' high school in the 1970s. That's more than 25% of the nations in the world were in my kids' high school, in my 1 mile square, 60,000 people on a square mile. In the inner 60,000? 60 in my community. You know Chicago, New York, high density, right? Uptown Edgewater. Within a mile by mile, 60,000 people. Sen High School, 63 nations. They were teaching in 11 languages. My two oldest boys ran against each other for homecoming team. My black kid, my adopted kid. Ryan. I have two Brians. I have a white Brian and a black Brian. But Woody was the white kid, and they ran against, and Woody won. I said, Woody, how'd you win? Because whites are only 11% of the school. He said, I got the Arab, black, and Chinese vote. I said, welcome to America. This was like, this is the hermeneutic, was me waking up to a missiological thing that nobody had been writing on yet. That is, the nations are now in our neighborhoods. It's the mission in reverse. No longer do you need to go over oceans to get to the least, last, and lost. They're coming at their own expense to live within the shadows of the spires of our cities. And it's not about black and white, rich and poor. That's what everybody else thought it was. The city was a black-white thing or a rich-poor thing. I was saying, no, it's the cities are now international. The cities have become the globe in confined space. I wrote about a church in Florida, had 31 flags hanging from the balcony when I went, an Episcopal, charismatic church. I said, oh, it must be a missions conference. They said, no. We have 31 nations in our membership now. I said, how's that work? Whenever we welcome a new member into our church, we buy a flag for them if we don't have it. Big flags, like classroom flags. We plant it down by the communion table. And on the Sunday we welcome them as members. We welcome their flag and their culture and all it represents. Then he said we give the flag to the hospitality committee. And we say, at the end of each month, they have a fellowship dinner, love meal. He said they serve the meal, the menu of our latest member. I know. Whoa, man, you mean that is so biblical. The guy who comes at 4:30 gets the same pay. Remember that, Jesus' parable? The newest member gets to say, welcome to my table, and here's welcome to my food, here's what it is. Then they give the flag to the missions committee, and they say, find a church. No, first they give it to the art committee, second. And they say, find some art from the country that sent us our latest members. So the church looked like the Louvre, every wall, every classroom. And the rector said to me, we want everybody to know that Jesus is not a tribal God, but he brings the tribes together here in this church. Right? Then he said, we give the flag to the missions committee and we say, find a church in that country that sent us our latest members. He said, we now have 34 sister churches in 34 countries, not even in the same denomination. We exchange pulpits, choirs, youth groups, ministry teams, work teams, in 34 countries now. And when you go outside, you will see bumper stickers. This is why they got the flag idea. The bumper sticker said, will the last American to leave Miami please bring the flag? There was such a hatred against and that's in the evangelical churches of our day around the Mexican border and the immigration stuff. This yeah, hey, this is not, I'm going to jump and leave too because I got to get going for the snow comes. But I'm trying to say that all of these demons that I think are worth doing are ebbed-in experience. They're not just theory. That's exciting. And he's got some passions going to come